So that's a remarkable story that you have, and just how all these outcomes turned out for the best part to be, even through all the struggles, you still managed to keep yourself together and take the life lessons from every situation. But what you said is that you only had to pick yourself up as you had your back against the law. Could you tell us a bit more about how you felt at that time? What was the moment that you decided, okay, I have to do this, I have to go all in here, and I have to devote all my...
The moment finally arrived for me when I was working in Western Australia. I was collaborating with another professional who was very good at what he did, but he didn't have the ability to document things. And so, because I can document things, he would get these consulting projects, he would do the strategic advice, and then I'd do the documentation to warrant, the commission in the first place. And what I learned there was, even though this man is a friend of mine and I've got a lot of respect for him, the way that he operates as a consultant was that he would withhold all the information. He'd only give me what I needed to do my job, and I never had any inkling of what was going on elsewhere. He never voluntarily gave that back to me. So he decided his modus operandi was just to hold on to all the information himself, which is completely anathema to the way that I operate. I need to know ultimately what's going on so that I can add all the benefits of my experience and expertise to help and, to add value and create value. And I realised that if I carried on in that guise and I waited for him to continually just deliver projects to me so that I could, eke a living out of it, the 5 years would go by and I'd be done. And then I never had any assurance that I was ever going to get any particular business from that relationship. I mean, as it happened, it trickled in, and it was enough to give me enough of a sort of a sense of, well, I can perhaps build this and ride this. But I realised that the working model that he had with me wasn't serving my interests at all, and that if I carried on like that, I had no future ahead of me. So I needed to pick myself. So that was the last sort of 5 or 6 months of my life where I realised I couldn't carry on like that. What I felt like then was in a trap of my own making. I had previously discounted the importance and the significance of the decisions that I was making that led to me being in the position that I was in. I had previously always felt that it would all come right because I had this latent ability within me to make it work. I felt I had a track record of success that would allow me to carry the day. But the emotional pain that I was going through was just this utter exhaustion over this idea that I was not succeeding. That it made no difference that I'd been successful in the past. That I've come from a working class family background with no money, and travel the world to get a great education, to live a charmed life, commuting between Australia and Hong Kong, having built up a reputation and expertise in a particular niche in Hong Kong, having forged relationships with people that count in Hong Kong. All of those things ultimately counted for nothing, because there I was in Western Australia, separate from the means of me to be able to make a living out of what I really know better than everybody else, which is Hong Kong immigration, not having the means to come back to Hong Kong to start again in the classic sense, industrial economy sense, which would have been an obvious thing for me to do. Knowing that, I was juggling resources all the time, robbing Peter to pay Paul, anticipating that the family home around me was not being properly maintained because I didn't have the money to be able to do fundamental maintenance. Having a very expensive car that I could no longer afford to run, and it was sitting sort of gathering dust while we were running around in the old claptrap thing. These are just sort of the hard edge of failure when you're staring it in your face, and then you say to yourself, well, I can't carry on like this, and you've got to dig deep. And I concluded for myself that the only way that I was going to save my ass was to go back into Hong Kong immigration, because that was the only thing that I needed, that I knew how to do. But I also knew that it was going to be a really long, hard slog ahead to get from that decision to a position where I could start making money out of it and I could control my own destiny again. I knew it was going to be a long, hard-won rescue. But I had nowhere else to go. I had to rescue myself. No one was going to come and save me. I put my head down. I worked at every hour God sent. I remember when I was writing the Hong Kong Visa Handbook, I would do it in a certain part of the house, and I was over in one corner, and I was working in that one corner of the house. And my wife had a friend over, a good friend, one day, and they were talking in Japanese. My wife's Japanese, so they were talking in Japanese, and I could understand them. And her friend had sort of asked jokingly, "What is he doing over there in the corner?" And my wife says, "I don't know. He's been there for 3 months now." Now, she knew what I was doing, but it was kind of like where I was 3 months into it. I'd about 40% of the content developed, and I knew I got at least another 3 months ahead of me before I'd be in a position to say, right, that's the Hong Kong Visa Handbook done. I was still doing my consulting during the day, making some sort of income there and keeping it afloat. But every night till 1, 2 in the morning, there I was documenting my know-how, researching, making sure it was brought up to date, that it was technically accurate, then doing the content plan, producing the scripts, anticipating the tools that I'd need to be able to do it, and then slowly building out in the corner of my house a content production studio, which was, a studio of one, me, doing all of this stuff. And while I'm doing all of that, of course, I'm still worried about paying the bills and making school fees, and then I had a problem with the Australian Tax Office, the ATO, and all of a sudden I had a new expense, a burden that I needed to meet, and I couldn't afford to not pay any of my creditors, but the ATO not least. So I was under that stress. But that just gave me more and more motivation, because I could draw down on this strength, which I hope people take from my story, that they can get that strength as well. Is that between 1996 and 2000 it made me, because I wrote a book and I put it on the internet, and it helped people answer questions and solve problems, and it helped me create relationships, and out of that I got revenue. So even when I had my back against the wall, I knew there was salvation in what I was doing, because it had worked once previously. For me, at that point, it was about just keeping it all afloat until such a time as I could tip into generating revenue out of all this content development exercise, and then building the service model, knowing that I was living in Australia, I didn't have the means to come back to Hong Kong to see clients, and so I'd have to service those clients remotely, so it forced me to use the internet as the service platform. So my circumstances forced me to really be creative about how I delivered the solution in my own life, and the day-to-day terror that I was experiencing and trying to juggle all these commitments that were coming at me, knowing that if I could just survive and I could just keep my head above water, and if Martin could just survive and he could keep his head above water, because there was two of us, right, and he had no money and I had no money, and both of us are divorced from our means of leveraging our expertise. Martin's not an immigration expert, he's my business partner, does all the tech, and he knows about immigration backwards, but he can't expect him to do cases and generate revenue out of that. That's not what he's all about. He's about manifesting, the externality of my proposition. So, digging deep, controlling the terror, taking a huge sense of satisfaction out of knowing that I was going to produce a solution that no one else had and was absolutely guaranteed to work, because it used to work and there's no reason why it wouldn't work this time around. So it was all of those things that allowed me to keep it all together. But there were times where we would have less than $50 in the bank, and I had a mortgage to pay next week, and I got school fees coming up, and I wasn't quite sure whether I'd have enough funds to be able to put gas in the car to get to my consulting gig, which was going to at least pay me some money if I could get there. And knowing that my wife was, looking at me and thinking, well, this is not something that I bargained for when I married you. This isn't really what I was up to. Now, I think all relationships and marriages go through problems, and the strength of your relationship means that you overcome those problems. And my wife and I have always been completely, tightly knit. So it was really just a case of controlling all the fear that naturally arises when it's all going wrong, but having a very strong sense of self-confidence that actually you know that the solution is within your grasp, and you just have to ride out the difficult times to get to that point where the solution ultimately presents itself as the foundation of what you're going to do in the future. So I was in that situation for about a year and a half. It took me about a year and a half from realising that I needed to pick myself to going through the content development process, keeping it all together, hanging it all in one place, and then the machine started to work, and then all of a sudden the problem started to get solved. But I keep telling people, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And what I'm really trying to achieve through this website is to give hope and a sense of courage to people that are in my situation, who might be facing my situation, knowing that you can't carry on doing what you've been doing in the way that you're doing it, because if you do, then you're going to go under, and you've got to get a way forward. And for me, what I've built and developed has been, in hindsight, really the only way I could solve my problems, I think.
Well, thank you, Stephen, for sharing your amazing story. It definitely inspired me. As a younger person growing up, I haven't faced any of these problems yet, but definitely I found myself in tough situations, and seeing that other people are going through the same things really gives you the inspiration to actually go out there and fight for what you know you're worth. So thank you for.
Well, you're always going to face difficulties in life, and the natural order of the universe is that, if it's not for the good times, you don't appreciate the bad times. When you're in the bad times, it gives you the opportunity to really understand what's valuable, so that when you go into the good times, you can always remember what it feels like in the bad times, so you always preserve the value. I think all of us on our individual human journeys go through challenges. We are vulnerable. None of us is Superman. But the final message, I think, I would hope, that comes from my story is that there's hope. Absolutely hope. It's just a question of making the right decisions and wanting the solution enough to invest in it, so that you can finally put those fears behind you, because it's a scary place to be. But sometimes you have to go right down to the bottom before you learn what you need to learn, so that you can begin to climb your way back up again.